You're listening there to Tom Marker, a sixth grade teacher from Ohio. And actually, this is Tom's third time on the podcast. We've brought him back to continue exploring his journey into his teaching strategies on what's going on in his math class. So he's here to kind of continue that journey, talk to us about changes that he's made since the last time we chatted, and we're eager to dive right in.
This is another Math Mentoring Moment episode where we chat with a teacher just like you who's working through some problems of practice, and together we brainstorm ways to overcome them. Welcome to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr. We are from MakeMathMoments.com.
This is the only podcast that coaches you through a 6-step plan to grow your mathematics program, whether at the classroom level or at the district level.
And we do that by helping you cultivate and foster your mathematics program like a strong, healthy, and balanced tree.
The trunk represents leadership in your organization or the classroom pillars in your math class. The roots of your tree represent mathematics content knowledge and what it means to be mathematically proficient.
Like a tree requires soil, water, and sunlight, your mathematics program requires a productive educator mindset and the belief that all students can achieve at high levels. Your professional learning structure or your professional learning plan is represented by the limbs of the tree.
The branches of your tree represent the development of educator pedagogical content knowledge, including effective teaching and equity-based teaching practices. And finally, the last section is the leaves of the tree, representing resources, tools, and the classroom environment.
If you master the 6 parts of an effective mathematics program, the impact of your math program will grow and reach far and wide.
Every week, you'll get the insight you need to stop feeling overwhelmed, gain back your confidence, and get back to enjoying the planning and facilitating of your mathematics program for the students or those educators that you serve.
So we're going to jump right into the conversation with Tom. But if you stick around, you're going to hear the nuggets that Tom brings for you to kind of make those changes in your classroom. He talks about breaking away from reliance on the calculator and how we can do that. He talks about problem strings and how that's changed the mathematical confidence in his students. And he's also going to talk about how do we keep that curiosity a little longer with our students, because that actually can drive the relationships in your classroom. So let's dig in.
Here we go. Welcome back to the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. How are you, my friend? Long time no chat.
I'm doing great. Thank you. Yeah, just into the summer mode and trying to wrap some things up from the school year and switching over to a new middle school. So yeah, it's been busy.
Yeah. Fill us in, Tom, on, we chatted with you way back on episode 129, then again on 186. You're making the rounds now. You're almost like tied with Peter Littledall. So,
and James Tanton. Don't forget
James Tanton, right? 3.5, I think his quote. His is he says. But Tom, fill us in on the last time we chatted. Like, what's new? What's changed? Give us maybe a win, and then maybe something that you're like, I wish this went differently.
I would say I've been involved a little bit with the building thing in classrooms, trying to implement that a little bit more. And I think it went well for the most part. I think we've developed some more creative thinkers and kids that are willing to take a little bit more risks. So I think that's been an improvement. I will say, state test scores come back. They've come back in Ohio, and those are always just depending on how you understand the data and how you implement the data. I think some people will take it as wins and losses and based on how students do. But for me, I being a baseball coach as well, we often talk about the wins don't always show up on a scoreboard, and I think that's true in the math classroom as well. I think some people may look at percent proficient as a win or a loss. And I think we might even talked about that in previous talks with you guys. But to me, I've seen a lot of growth in our students just in their I'd say eye contact and student skills, and maybe that doesn't always show up on the passing of test scores, but whether they've grown as a student in their ability to articulate things in the math classroom or their willingness to take risks. I've seen a lot of improvement there. So the test scores are the test scores, and I think some of them did really, really well. Some of them may have wished they did better on a single day and a snapshot, but overall, the course of the year, I think we've made some huge strides.
Huge, huge. And something else too, I think that's really important. Like you had said, I want to dig a little deeper on this idea of maybe sometimes some of the changes not showing up on the scoreboard. And I think that's true, especially in math class, because the reality is that there is such a long journey. So when you implement anything in your math classroom, oftentimes it's not year one when all of a sudden everybody, hops on board and everything is looking great. And the other piece that I think is really important for us to remember is that test scores are often compared to a different group of students, right? That trailing data where you're going, hey, this new class, I tried all these new things, and then they ended up scoring similarly to last year's class. But wait a second, that was a different group. Like imagine if there was a way for us to be able to see what would have happened if we went one way versus another with the same group of students, which I know we don't have the authority or the ability to do in this world. But I think that's something that's really important for us to remember in education is that the mini wins are really important. It sounds like you had some anecdotal sort of evidence that suggested that you were making some gains in certain areas. So I'm wondering, over this past school year, what would you say would be sort of like, if you had to pick one thing, and I'm sure there was many that you were trying to improve pedagogically for your students, but what would be like the one area that you would say that, was most important to you to trying to sort of make some gains in?
I would probably say I think of it as breaking down barriers, right? And I would say the student's perspective and how they view math has grossly changed in a positive way. And I hear it from parents who send emails, the positive emails, and from students' feedback as well. But just as far as them saying, I enjoy the struggle, the productive struggle. I enjoy looking at math from a different lens. I enjoy seeing how it plays into the future or being able to solve problems. One of our big things is proportional reasoning and percentages, and them telling me, when I go with my parents to a restaurant, I can calculate the tip quickly for them, or I can say that's probably not right. That's probably not fair. And have conversations about that. And so I think that's the cool part, is hearing about how they have conversations with their parents, about math, but they don't feel like it's math class. It's real life application. And I think that would be probably the biggest win. And I also think that true growth it's not a linear progression. Like development isn't linear. Like you're not going to just continually get better in math. That you're going to have pitfalls, and you're going to have days where there's some struggles, or content where it's more difficult for a student to understand. But I would say the biggest gains would be the conversations that I hear them having with their parents, and then outside of the math class.
That is a huge gain, and what a gift, to give to the parents. What a gift to give, to the kids. And when I say give, it's something that they created. That you created with them. It's a team aspect for sure. Tom, what would you say when you think about that kind of big win and you think of that big change? Like what changes did you put in place this year, last year, over the course, to create this atmosphere, to create these wins? Like what do you think is probably you can contribute some of the actions that you've taken to kind of build that?
I think we talk more about approach in the classroom and more about character traits and more about resiliency and problem solving, as we talk more about those things as opposed to talking strictly about curriculum. And I think in math, getting over those hurdles and the nervousness and our students are more inclined to ask the why nowadays and to challenge. And I think a lot of times students come into the classroom and think they just need to listen as opposed to challenge. And I tell them all the time, challenge my thinking, or if you have a better way to approach feel free to speak up. I think a lot of times they think asking why is disrespectful, or asking, or saying, I don't fully agree with that way is disrespectful. And I think we've created a community of learners within the classroom where we challenge each other. We joke around a lot, but also have the seriousness when it's needed. But I just think the challenging piece and the research piece and telling students, look up ideas or try to find new ways, get on YouTube. What's the big talk right now with chat? What is it?
GPT.
Yeah, and people are so nervous about it, and I love it. I think hearing different voices, in that regard, is probably not a voice, but seeing how it's described or spoken about differently or explained differently, I'm all about. But I think if you're just given drill style questions and very not very deep level thinking questions, yeah, then you're probably a little bit worried about that. But for me, I don't. I think having kids utilize the resources that are at their fingertips is okay. I think.
I love it.
I don't know. I don't get too worried about those things.
I love it. I heard you say something in that description of sort of what has been going on in the classroom. You were articulating this, students feeling like almost open and willing to accept that productive struggle. And then also you highlighted how, they've maybe shared with you how they've leveraged some of their math flexibility or their fluency that they've developed to use outside of school. And that reminded me, you mentioned that it seems like students are now more interested in understanding the why. I remember your Pebble was about parents and helping them to understand the why. Do you feel or do you sense that they're starting to see that? Like, is that Pebble starting to sort of, get kicked out of that shoe as they start to, witness and observe their own children acting maybe differently, having more of a productive disposition towards the mathematics? Is that helping you get, I guess, further down that road, or do you feel like that's still a pebble that you're kind of working on? Where's your head at there?
I teach in an unbelievable district like Olentangy City Schools. I don't know how familiar you are with it, but it's an awesome district. And my daughter's in 5th grade. And I think one thing that's helped me as a 6th grade math teacher is the way that they're teaching math at the younger levels. And I see them with my 5th grader. I saw it when she was in 4th and 3rd grade as well. And so my wife still will see the homework or the work that my daughter's working on, and questions say, and my mother-in-law as well, is, why aren't we just doing the old school long division and having those questions? And I try to stay quiet so I don't get myself in too much trouble, but they're teaching them so many good ways and methods of solving problems at the younger levels that it's making my job easier as a 6th grade math teacher. So where I was worried about parents, wondering, why aren't we doing it this way or this method and questioning the whys, I don't see it as much anymore, but I think it's because our district is doing such a good job. I mean, as a whole, I've talked to teachers in PE that have read Building Thinking Classrooms and have implemented that and are getting away from the calculator. I teach 6th grade math. I don't remember a student using a calculator maybe until we were working on projects at the very end of the year and we were seeking answers as opposed to understanding the why. But students don't ask about calculators at all in 6th grade math, at least what I deal with, unless it's something, and we tell them all the time, if it's something ridiculous that we're dealing with or maybe that getting the answers more important than the understanding, then go ahead. But it's a testament to our district, I think.
Awesome. Yeah. I love it as well. Let's say a teacher's listening right now and when they hear that you're not using a calculator in the 6th grade, they're like, oh my gosh, like, how do I get my students to kind of break away from reliance on that? And what would you say to them, Tom? And like, give us maybe something that you're doing in your classroom, like a strategy, a teacher move that kind of says like, this is where, this is how you can do it too. And make sure that, you're focusing on this, or you can do it this way to help kind of break students away from that kind of crutch, to go straight to the calculator.
I think you have to be really strategic in the questions that you ask and the prompts and the problems that you put in front of students, because I think oftentimes we don't think out those problems and ahead of time. So I think that's one thing, is just to make sure you're not asking questions that have, I don't want to say ridiculous answers, but those problems where you're like, oh man, I didn't mean to give a student a question that that ended in this repeating decimal or whatever the case may be. I think you have to be strategic in the problems and the prompts that you put in front of students. And then also, I think, to give the students the flexibility to be close to answers. I think in the report, I think a lot of times, say for instance, we were given I don't know, just a 20% tip of $3 or $13.79. I think to be close is really important. If you're saying 20% and you're saying, okay, what is that going to be? 274 is close. You don't have to be exact. To be in a ballpark in real life mathematics, I think a lot of times serves you well. Now, obviously, if you're a doctor and you're dealing with doses and things along those lines, you want to be pretty precise. But I think in talking and having the conversation about precision and about accuracy and when it's vitally important and when it's not. But I think that's important. I also think problem strings have changed the way we operate in my classroom a lot, and just seeing how to work from seeing patterns and understanding those things, and how important it is to know that if you know 10%, 5% and 20%, and then 25%, and let students make those connections and see it on their own. And we've done a lot of things with problem strings in my classroom where students will pick up on it quicker than other students. Whether it's we go from 10%, I mean, I use percentages a lot, but anything with proportions, but 10% to 40%, and then they see 4%. They're like, well, how am I ever going to figure out 4%? Where another student might catch it quickly. And I think that's important.
For sure. I love it. And I'm so happy, you just kind of gave me some excitement, because I think problem strings are massively helpful. Those who are listening and are leveraging our, units of study that we have on our website, Day 2 and day 4 of each unit typically have a problem string like you're describing, trying to emerge a specific behavior of the mathematics, right? And I love your focus on proportional reasoning. Such an area we know from research where we lose so many students, right? They decide that they are no longer math people because they do not have that fluency, that flexibility. They don't have the tools, the models. And it sounds like you and your district are doing a fantastic job with that. Now, I want to, end on, I don't want to take us down from a positive end to this school year, but I'm wondering, as you go into summer, this is when we're recording it for those who are listening, heading into the summertime, what's on your mind now? It doesn't necessarily have to be like a massive problem or pebble, but I'm wondering, where's your head at in terms of what are you hoping to kind of put your thinking towards in order to continue this really positive trajectory that it seems that you and your students are on for next year?
I think every year, whether it's, and then again, I'm a baseball coach as well, but as a teacher or as a coach, I just hate that there's times where we lose one or two students, and how do we make sure that doesn't happen? And how do we make sure that everyone has an enjoyable, and everybody's, well, you're always going to have students who don't enjoy it, or players that don't enjoy the season, or whatever the case may be, but it still eats at me that we lose students at times. And I think even speaking to test scores, sometimes we'll get a test score back and we'll say, I kind of knew that was going to happen. Well, why did we let that happen? Or that student was struggling all year. I knew that they weren't going to perform well throughout the course of the year. But then I guess I would challenge it to say, then why did we let it? Because if we knew it, then why did we let that happen? And so I think it's me finding a way to better utilize my teacher support, whether it's other teachers in the room, aides in the room, even really strong students in the room. How do we leverage them to make sure that we don't have anybody fall through the cracks? Because I think as teachers, we always say that, and I've seen it in teacher meetings, or we'll say, so-and-so has been struggling all year, and we're in January. Why haven't we fixed this yet? If we know it's happening, what are we doing to find out and make it better? So
that's huge. I think that is so huge, because how many, middle school teachers, high school teachers are are in those positions where the student is struggling, and you're not exactly sure what to do to kind of get them over that kind of ledge, or maybe you miss them along the way. Like that is a huge concern, and should be a huge concern for us, in our classrooms. And when I think about that, I think about systems. I think about, like, what is it in my classroom system, like my moves, my outside kind of structures and procedures, when I'm thinking about planning lessons and follow-ups to lessons, and in assessments and follow-ups to assessments, that can kind of catch those gaps, I guess I'll say. Tom, what kind of systems are you putting into place, or have you put into place to kind of help catch those students, and not let them slip through those gaps?
I mean, I really think, at least in the middle school level, relationships is everything, and just trying to forge a relationship where they trust you as a teacher, because I think a lot of times they probably have had historical struggles in the classroom, and so I think it's really important for us to find out why, though. I don't think any student walks into your classroom and says, I want to fail, or I don't want to do well. There's always a why behind their actions and their struggles as well. So I think really working hard to get a relationship with the student, to make them enjoy coming to class. I think that's first and foremost, probably the most important thing is students aren't going to do well if they don't enjoy being in the environment. And so just try to find a way to get them involved in the classroom. And I think a lot of times too, at least in my experience, a lot of the struggling students are students who are maybe new to the school as a whole. I think we need to do a better job making students feel included or accepted in a new environment. I think that's, a lot of students struggle because maybe they've had family dynamics or situations where they've moved and switched schools. And so how do we get them to feel involved, included, and valued within your classroom? I think that's probably a lot of times where the struggles come from. Right. We just had to do a better job of that overall. And maybe it's not new to the building. Maybe they're not new to the school district, but they are new to your classroom. And especially in middle school, sixth graders are, that jump to middle school, it's just different. They're switching classes. And so we just got to keep an eye on those students and make sure they feel included.
Absolutely. I think you just nailed it. I think as students move up through the grades, right, they start to become more aware, right? When you look at students in grade 1 and grade 2, like they go into the class and, they're interacting with each other. They're proud of who they are. They're just having a blast. But it seems like every year students start to recognize, and they worry about being judged. They worry about what other people are thinking. And as we work our way up, and you sort of triggered a memory of mine that I haven't thought about in quite some time, but I think it's worth all of us thinking about. As a former high school math teacher, I was in the classroom, and it was almost like, I remember in the early years, almost avoiding group work, where I mixed up the groups because I didn't want to put any students in an awkward situation. Like, I was concerned for that to happen. And it was almost like I avoided it. And I've it's like a little epiphany I've had here on this podcast. But what I recognize is that the sooner we can do that, right? And you were talking about building relationships, teacher and students, but the sooner we can help those students all build relationships together early in that classroom environment and continue to do that work so it doesn't become very cliquey, right? It just sort of, I think, emphasizes some of the work that, Peter Lildahl's work with random grouping has, sort of brought as sort of an aside to the math classroom, is bringing students together so that everyone feels like they're a part of that math community, whether they're new to the school. Maybe they're just new to that group of students, right? If it's a large school, maybe they've never been in classes with some of these students before, and, they might feel a little bit shy or introverted. So that's a little takeaway for me that I've taken away. The other piece I wanted to comment on is this idea of relationship building and what we can do as educators. So for those who are listening, and if you're thinking about, hey, I want to make sure that I start off next school year with a bang, we do have resources for starting the school year off right. So there's a series of activities. I know, John, we just recently shared out the Math is Like activity in a recent email for those who are on the email list. However, there's an awesome resource if you head to makemathmoments.com/start. Those who are thinking over the summer about like, hey, how am I going to start off next year so that I feel like the students know that I can be known, liked, and trusted by them, that we could build that relationship. So just like, we're hearing from Tom here, that we can better identify earlier those students who may struggle a little bit more than some other students, so that, Tom, I vividly remember being that guy. It was like I sort of knew this was going to happen at the end of the school year, and I'm like, I missed it. I didn't do enough to help that student. So let's do that from day one. My friend Tom, you've given me a big takeaway just reflecting on that. How about you, my friend, from this conversation? What's on your mind now? And what have you, I guess, gained from this reflective conversation we've had here today?
Well, I like how you mentioned, as you move up through the grades and students start to feel different as they go through the grades. And it just made me think back to a question that I ask our students a lot of times, because as a father of three and my daughter getting older, I always worry, like, at what age do students not enjoy school anymore? And I ask our sixth graders, because I teach sixth grade, which is to me, the best grade to teach, just because there still is a high level of curiosity, a high level of innocence. But, I think it's important to think about, as students get older, they fall out of love with learning. And why does it happen, and when does it happen? And it's obviously different for everybody, but as teachers, we got to try our best to keep that curiosity level going and keep that innocence going as long as we possibly can. And that's why I don't want to move away from sixth grade, is just because I feel like there's a ton of aha moments that still occur with sixth graders. And then also lastly, I think like I've said before, I'm a high school baseball coach. We just had a pretty successful season. And I attribute it all to the physical connection between players. And I think in sixth grade math, a fist bump after you get an answer right, or you have a good question, or you're involved in the class, or a high five, I think, as much as you can connect with students and that physical touch, now that we're kind of out of the COVID era. So the fist bump or the high five is vitally important in your classroom, and just making kids feel welcome and connected to everybody is so important.
I think those are great takeaways, Tom, and great takeaways for the listener to kind of think about and reflect on their classroom experiences and what they can be doing over the summer to get ready for that start of the school year. I think it's so important to kind of stretch that curiosity a little longer. And if you're teaching higher grades, how can you kind of think like Tom here? Like, how can you think about kind of bringing that curiosity back into your classroom so that you can, be in a position to build these relationships that we know go a long way to solving so many of the problems that we regularly feel in the classroom. So Tom, I want to thank you for joining us here on the Making Math Moments That Matter podcast. And hey, as always, we're going to reach out again, Tom. Again, it's been a yearly thing for us in chatting with you. So we got to keep that going.
I enjoy it. Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, thanks for joining us, and enjoy that summertime. As always, both John and I learned so much from every Math Mentoring Moment episode. And this one in particular, I really like because, it seems like we've met Tom. We've spoken with him so many times. I love the passion when he's describing his math classroom, the community that's been built. And really, when I think about this, I'm picturing that in his math classroom, he's talking a lot about the soil, the sun, the water of that tree, right? He's talking about the mindsets, the beliefs. And these are all things that we can heavily impact. And it sounds like Tom has obviously put a lot of thought and effort into that particular part of his tree, but don't let the other parts sort of go unnoticed. The part I'm going to bring up is this idea around the content knowledge and the mathematical proficiency piece, those roots of the tree, when he was talking about number strings and just the fluency and flexibility he's seeing develop in his grade 6 students, I think is just fantastic.
I love it there, Kyle. And we're excited to chat with him again for a fourth time, probably next year. So stay tuned to continue Tom's journey. And if you want to chat with us about a current pebble in your shoe, then we encourage you to head on over to makemathmoments.com/mentor. That's makemathmoments.com/mentor. We got a quick little form there for you to fill out. All you have to do is put your name, your contact info, and a little bit about the pebble you're experiencing. And if you share that pebble there, we might reach out to you and have a chat here on the podcast. And hey, you know what? Like, if you have that pebble, chances are other teachers have that pebble. So I know that sometimes you can be nervous, or you can be a little bit kind of hesitant to talk to the two of us and it be broadcast. But hey, everyone who has done that has kind of made changes in their classroom, but also felt so great afterwards, after the conversation. So we're going to encourage you to do that, not only to help yourself, but help fellow educators that are helping students just like yours.
Awesome. And friends, head on over to the show notes page over at makemathmoments.com/episode 242. You're going to find all kinds of great goodies, including links that we referenced here, including our How to Start the School Year Off Right guide. You can go check that out once again over at makemathmoments.com/episode 242. Well, until next time, my Math Moment Maker friends, I'm Kyle Pierce.
And I'm John Orr.
High fives for us.
And a high five for you.